Hey, it's William Mullaney from Flowers and Scents with your floral industry buzz. Okay, so today I want to talk about ripelocker. And ripelocker is something, it's a company that has a product that makes things last longer, like flowers. How about that? And as I travel around to these conventions, I sort of look for people that are selling something different or offering something new and different. And the last time I ran into these people at ripelocker, they were about to take 100-year, no, not 100-year, 100-day-old blueberries into a convention. So I said, all right, time for an interview. Let's see what's going on with you guys. So without further ado, Julian Lewis of ripelocker. Julian Lewis of ripelocker. I understand you're new with the company, so you must have all the information that they could possibly force into you in a short amount of time. So, okay, ripelocker. So, last time I met Celine, well, other than the Fort Lauderdale where I met you as well, she was
Yes.
on her way to an exhibition where she had a handful of 100-day-old blueberries, I think, or something.
Ah,
She was going to demonstrate how this thing worked, or at least the results of how it worked. So, at any rate, ripelocker does something for produce and flowers and things that are alive. So, tell us about it.
yeah, sure. So thanks for inviting me, and I'm pleased to explain what the right blocker is. So at a very high level, it's a platform that enables the user to make data-driven decisions so they can provide fresh, quality products to their customers, and importantly, very predictably and very consistently. So like there's a lot of words in there, so let me just unpack it. Effectively, there's hardware and there's software, and we're doing two things. We're prolonging the life and the freshness of produce and floral products.
Okay.
And we're doing that in a way where we're collecting data that provides you, the user, with insights so that you know what the outcome of this storage is going to be over extended life, and you can influence it as well. And at the heart of that, what are we doing? We're basically harnessing the power of respiration. So any fresh product, whether it's a floral product or an edible produce category, they respire. They're aerobic systems, just like we are. We consume oxygen and we produce CO2. And the act of doing that is an aerobic process, and it is senescence and decay.
Yeah,
And
two
so,
big words that I wasn't familiar with,
yeah,
but go ahead.
sure, sure. Yeah, okay. So if so the act of a fresh product aging over time is that consumption of oxygen and producing CO2.
Okay.
If we can slow that down, we extend the life. We slow down senescence. And that's what we're doing with our hardware. And we're doing it through the magic, let's say, of a vacuum. And so the right locker hardware is a vacuum chamber. And when I say vacuum, it's ultra low oxygen at less than the tenth of an atmosphere. And so we don't want an absolute vacuum in our container because there would be no oxygen and then the product would not breathe, it would die.
Right.
But we can, under low pressure, the physiological profile of products changes. Kind of like the same way that if you boiled water on the top of Mount Everest, it would boil at a different temperature than at sea level. Okay, so physiological behavior changes. In a low pressure environment, we can supply tiny amounts of oxygen to keep the product alive, and it will produce tiny amounts of CO2. And we manage that in a dynamic way to create an extremely extended shelf life. So let me give you some examples, floral examples. So typically, I think conventional methods of storage can handle storing flowers maybe for 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. And so the right blocker is operating between 6 and 8 weeks. And actually in our lab, my science team won't like me saying this because it's not something we can promise commercially. It can be 10 or 12 weeks, but certainly 6 to 8 is what our commercial customers are operating with. In other categories, you mentioned the blueberries. We've got customers literally right now in the Pacific Northwest. It's blueberry harvest season. They're going to be storing blueberries from between 6 to 10 weeks. And you're right, I think we met at IFPA in, where was it, Anaheim last year. and we were proudly showing off blueberries that we'd stored for over 100 days. And we're operating other categories, other soft berries, also cherries, avocados, but we'll focus on flowers today. And so we're extending the life through the use of these vacuum chambers. But the magic of the vacuum chamber is not only the life that they extend, but they're collecting data that you, if you were a user, could view on your smartphone. And the data it's providing would tell you when the optimal time to open the vacuum chamber would be. That timing might be driven by your commercial needs. You might just need the flowers, or you might see that produce is not consistent, right? There's different farms with different climatic conditions. Just some things go better than other things at different parts of the season. And so everything performs slightly differently. We try to create more consistency, but the data we're providing will tell you when the optimal time to bring your product out of our storage chamber is. And the ripe locker itself, so the ripe locker is this chamber, has been deliberately designed to be the size of a pallet, and with the benefit of it can move through the supply chain just like a pallet, occupying the
Yeah,
same
that
space.
was probably the most startling thing that I noticed on the website was that you can take the thing with you, essentially.
Correct,
Or
correct, yeah.
it can go, but so are they economical enough? So what do you do? Okay, I ship it, I put my flowers in there and I'm shipping it to my customer wherever they may be.
Yeah.
And they can take it out of the machine, I guess, when they're ready for it. And then what, you get the machine back? I can imagine they're expensive enough. You don't want to just leave them lying around.
Correct, yeah. So the purpose of them being pallet size is A, they move very easily. Secondly, we can make them from pretty low cost materials. They're effectively made of plastic, right? So when one thinks of vacuum chambers, you probably think about huge stainless steel kind of structures that cost, gazillions.
Yeah.
These are low cost things. And the other point is that because they're relatively small, you can open and close them only affecting small amounts. You might just need some flowers, but not a lot of flowers. And so you've kind of got a bit more modularity there. So moving them and returning them is a good point. We've really got two ways in which our customers in the floral industry are using the ripe locker. We've got a whole business model orientated around stationary storage. So we've got a number of customers that harvesting the flowers, doing their usual post-harvest treatments, wet packing them, air freighting them to Miami, and then they might want to stage inventory to build up for an event. And so they're using them actually as a stationary tool. They're not moving anywhere. We're now exploring with customers, particularly from Ecuador, using the ripe locker as a transportation tool. So particularly targeting distant markets where you would probably have to air freight if you're using conventional technology. But with the storage duration that the ripe locker offers, you can move to ocean freight, and you could tolerate all kinds of delays that might happen on ocean freight, and you'd still be okay. So going to your cost point, yeah, there's a cost of using the ripe locker. You've got to buy some ripe lockers. But then there's savings in terms of reduction of losses, maybe moving from air to ocean. And probably the biggest saving that customers are making, and probably the biggest reason they're using them, is flowers are being produced constantly, not necessarily in line with demand. And so staging that inventory, I mean, trying to build inventory for Valentine's Day is like the classic challenge, right? And so
Yeah.
you can use the ripe locker to do that.
And so in a ripe locker unit, how many flowers are fitting in there?
So approximately 2,500 stems. And I'm quoting that for our biggest use at the moment is in roses. So obviously different flowers occupy different amounts of space, but roughly 2,500 stems in a ripe locker.
And are they still in the boxes or you've taken them out of the boxes? What?
So they're not in the cardboard packs. They're wrapped either as bouquets or just a collection in a cellophane wrap, and kind of laid up within the ripe locker itself. And so what I should say, the ripe locker maintains 100% humidity, and so storing them kind of loose or in bouquet wraps is ideal because we're maintaining 100% humidity. So there's no weight loss or loss of of hydration within the flowers.
So
In
you,
some cases, the hydration increases, which is a kind of a benefit.
so you have this box essentially. It
Yeah, container. Yeah,
looks like a pallet. It's about as tall as a pallet would be, I guess.
exactly. Yeah,
It has a door. You open it up. You throw your bouquets in and push some buttons on the computer, and it does its magic. Am I
that's
right?
it. That's it. Yeah, you load it. You put the top on. It basically looks like a barrel. It's round because the design, the engineering challenge of creating something that could withstand a vacuum
Yeah.
is pretty serious. And so that's a patented engineering design. But you're right. You put the top on. You press a button on your smartphone. It pressures down, and then you walk away. I mean, we know customers get a bit obsessive. They wake up every morning, they look at their smartphone and look at the condition of their precious produce in there, and it's pretty interesting to see.
So obviously these things are powered at some level. How do you keep them running while it's in an airplane or a boat or a ship or something?
Yeah, so the right blocker itself is not refrigerated. We use the refrigeration of the supply chain because there's an excellent cold chain. And
Okay.
so if they're being moved in transit, they'd go in a reefer, and we basically take the power that's supplying the reefer. So there's a connection to be made from the chilled shipping container, the reefer, to a pump and control system. And so there's a box. That's a box which powers or services, let's say, 20 right blockers. And so the box is, I'm going to use my hands here, it's kind of this big. It's a pump, it's a control system. And that's where a lot of the magic's happening. It's individually sampling each chamber to say, oh, you've used a little bit of oxygen, you've produced some CO2. I'm going to make a micro adjustment to pull it back into line. And this is one of the other real advantages versus more passive forms of storage technology, is that every single chamber is being adjusted in a small micro way several times, daily, 24/7.
Okay, so coming from the logistics business and being around trucks all my life and
Yeah.
loading flowers in many trucks in my life. Okay, so I'm imagining I'm loading these things on there, and I'm using the power of the refrigeration unit,
Yes.
not just for cold, but for electric or for.
For electric, so that powers a pump, which is basically managing the O2 and the CO2, and just the electronics of the sensors.
So my
So
point is that
it's a very
somebody.
small amount of power, but
Okay, but
it needs
somebody has to, like, I'm imagining if you're putting these on my family's trucks, there's got to be a gadget. Somebody's got to plug the thing in.
there's a
And it's
gadget,
not
yeah. So
designed to do that at the moment, I don't think.
no, correct. So so for the transportation, there's a very small modification that needs making to the standard chilled shipping container to feed power to the right blocker. It's in the case where the shipping container is going backwards and forwards, that's easy. If it's something that you're going to move on the shipping container to another purpose, the modification's reversible in a short space of time. And I have to say, we're doing this literally, actually, as we speak, shipping fresh produce from Peru to Europe and Asia. We've just completed a shipment. This is not in floral, I might add, from Morocco to Europe, and we're working with other parts of the world. So it's the use of the right blocker as transportation is probably a newer development within floral. The larger use has been stationary storage, but the rewards are definitely there for
Okay.
the transportation.
All right, I'm starting to make sense here. Okay, so my thought would be thinking of the logistics of all this. Okay,
Yeah.
if people in Miami, which makes
Yes.
sense now, the growers are cutting, so they send it to Miami, put it
Mhm.
in storage, put it in the right blocker, and wait till the market is right, or you need the flowers or whatever, and then you take them out of the gadget. You got to put them back in a box, put them on our
Yes.
truck. Or I say our truck, put them on a truck. Um, and ship them. So they got to be reboxed at some point, if when they go back to normal transportation, or if you got to air them or FedEx them or something.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
well that complicates things a little bit, but not horribly.
Yeah,
But
and I'd say there's multiple versions of that. So we've got customers that move the flowers to, well, let's start from the start. We've got customers who store them in, let's say, Colombia or Ecuador, and then remove them from the right blockers and then send them on the normal journey. Then
right,
we've got customers who've chosen to get them to Miami and store there before they move onward. And now we've got customers who are considering using the right blocker also to be part of the journey from Miami to, let's say, West Coast US. And then other customers, this has not yet happened, who are considering using traditional methods of getting the produce from, let's say, Colombia, Ecuador to Europe, and then on receipt in Europe, putting them in a right blocker. Now, the best storage results will be when you store as close to the farm as possible, because no decay's happened. If you're going to wait until you got all the way to Europe, obviously some senescence has happened,
Yeah.
but there's still very, very good results. So we've got a customer who has multiple cash and carries throughout Europe. Predicting when customers are going to walk through the door and want some kind of random selection is difficult, right? Managing inventory is a classic kind of florist nightmare. And so the
Yeah.
right blocker gives you that buffer of inventory.
Okay. Well, this is most fascinating from the standpoint of trying to connect the dots here and where it works and where it doesn't work or might work better than others. And might I ask, are you you're working with some growers now, I take it? Some flower growers?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're working with some major groups. We've really, our work started in Colombia, and we've got a team now in Colombia, and equipment's available. And we've just taken on a distributor in Ecuador, Juan Yazbek, who used to run and own Direct Cargo. He's our distributor, and he's currently literally now running trials with, I think there's about 10 different large growing groups trialing the right blocker, and there's quite a queue waiting to kind of use the equipment next. So that's proving to be extremely interesting for us, and we love the quality of the roses coming out of Ecuador. Extremely impressive.
Well, when I looked at the website, you have a comparison there, which threw me off to begin with because it shows ripe locker storage. And what normally in a demonstration like this, you say, okay, this wasn't in storage, this was in a ripe locker for 6 weeks and 6 weeks, and these are dead and these are alive. That's normal. But they both looked alive because after I read the lines, it said, okay, these are freshly harvested versus stored
Yeah.
for 6 weeks. And of course, they look the same. Um, so,
Yeah, and that was it. That's a good question actually. Yeah, because normally you'd say, what do they both look like after 6 weeks? But like that was almost, I suppose, maybe pointless because the ones without a right blocker
they look the same.
wouldn't be there basically. I
Yeah.
think what we were trying to demonstrate, but it's a good challenge for our kind of marketing and communications is these look as good as freshly harvested. That's the point, and they are because almost no senescence. Well, we kind of talk about putting the product to sleep. How technically correct a term that is, I don't know, but we effectively put it to sleep, almost like you imagine an astronaut being sent to Mars. If we can put them to sleep, they'll wake up just as old when they get there as the day they set off. And that's the way we think about the flowers.
Well, look, vacuum cooling is nothing new to flowers. They've been vacuum cooling flowers for years now. With, I think, a lot of success. It seems to be when they go by ship, the vacuum cooling seems to be the way to go, uh,
Yeah.
based on the knowledge I have and experience I have. And yeah, we call it putting flowers to sleep. And I tell people, okay, they last that long because you put them at 32 degrees, you keep the humidity right, and they're sort of just sitting there, not respirating much, or
Correct.
the fancy word you used.
In essence. Yeah.
Yes. Um, well, again, it's quite interesting, and I'm curious how people will take to this, because again, it makes total sense to the case that you are. Valentine's Day, yeah, the prices are higher. It's hard to store all the flowers, and frankly, it's the worst time in the world to buy flowers is on Valentine's Day if you're a consumer because they've been stored so damn long.
Yes.
So, if there's a way to prevent that or at least improve that quality, I think it's a winner. If you can get all the pieces right. May I ask what one of these gadgets? What's the cost approximately?
Yeah, so I mean the cost it kind of depends on the configuration of how you're going to use it and how you put it together. But I'll give you an illustration. So the groups that are using it at the moment in primarily in Miami, they're buying the system and they're getting an ROI, return on investment, basically paying for the system in 18 months or less. And so, and that's made up of a combination of using the right blocker multiple times a year. So the big one's Valentine's, right? That covers a lot of ground. Then
Mhm.
there's obviously a follow on for Mother's Day, but there's a build for Christmas, and then other minor events in the year. So interestingly, one of our most major users have got hundreds of ripe lockers in Miami, and we could see on the system they just loaded a couple of hundred of them last week. And I was like, oh, that's strange. I didn't think summer was a big kind of time. And I guess it's just because, oh, my only guess is extreme heat wave. I think a sudden drop off in demand, and they suddenly got like a lot of flowers. I'm like,
Yeah,
what do we
well,
do
it's
with these
coming.
flowers?
The plants keep growing. The beauty of
Yeah,
growing in South America is the weather stays pretty consistent, which is why it's good to grow flowers there.
yeah, exactly.
Well, Julian, look, this has been most interesting, and I keep these to 20 minutes, which we're just a little
Yeah.
bit over because
Wow. Okay. I talked a
people
lot.
don't listen after about 20 some minutes. So I try to keep these as short as possible. Look, what I try to do here, and I hope I've done, is pique people's interest to say, what's this all about? I think I need to know more. So when they want to know more, they can obviously go to Flowers and Scents and click on your banner.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Or just go to ripelocker.com
Oh,
and find out more because it's a pretty interesting product and it's anything that's good for flowers is I'm happy to talk about. And it seems to be good for flowers as long as it's the flowers are still happy when it's all said and done.
that's great. No, I really appreciate the platform to speak. It's great to see you again. And I really appreciate keeping up to speed with Flowers and Scents. And we'll be kind of walking the floor at the IFPA show. I always get the name wrong in Atlanta, I think, this
SAF,
year.
SAF, I take it, the one in Miami you mean, coming up.
Not, I'll be the one in
Oh, no,
Atlanta.
you're IFTA. Yeah, you'll be at
AFPA.
IFTA. Yes, in Atlanta. I'll see you there.
See you there.
And sir, have a great day, and I
Yeah.
enjoyed the conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks, Willie. See
All
you
right.
soon.
Bye
Thank
now.
you.